Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Alex Ord. On Sunday, the Falcons tried to heal the wounds of Braves fans and get a win and move into first place in the NFC South, and they could not do it. They dominated this game in most all facets of the game. They just turned the ball over 3 times. Desmond Ridder, coming off his best performance, turned in one of his worst. They did throw the ball around the yard a little bit. I mean, Drake London had his biggest game. We saw Kyle Pitts catch his first touchdown of the series, but they just turned the ball over. And some of these picks were terrible. And then beyond that, there were several plays like on the other side of the field where they had delay of games and illegal motions and stuff like that, just penalties that you can't have when you're trying to go in there and get points. And that was really the difference in the game against the Commanders team that was very beatable, that you dominated most of the game. So that's got to leave a sour taste in your mouth. The only solace that you can really take is the rest of the NFC South looked just as bad. You saw the Saints go in there and lose to the Texans. Tampa Bay got dominated at home to the Detroit Lions. So this division now is starting to look how we all kind of expected it to look at the beginning of the year. You had some surprises. The Falcons were a little bit of the surprise. The Bucs were a little bit of the surprise. Now nobody's over 500. The Falcons and the Bucs play next week. It's going to be a huge game that the Falcons really need to win. But you got to. I mean, if you're a Falcons fan, you got to feel very, very uncomfortable with the way that they lost to a bad Commanders team.
Yeah, Desmond Ridder had the two worst performances of his career against the Lions and Jags. Then followed it up with the best performance of his career against the Texans, setting career marks in yards, completion percentage, completions. It was very encouraging. And then he followed it up with a bag of mixed results. Initially, my knee-jerk reaction was get this guy off my team. But I took a look, and the first drive, the opening drive, which is something that we've been harping on, starting fast, was absolutely surgical. Desmond Ridder went, I think, 6 of 7 for like 70-ish yards and a touchdown. He looked like he was in control. He looked like he was seeing the field well. He looked like he was being decisive in the pocket. As soon as he hit his back foot and his drop, the ball was out. It looked really good. The rest of the drives in the first half weren't great. A pair of punts and a turnover on down. Arthur Smith went for it around midfield. We didn't get it. But the second half was just a tale of two cities. You know, that's what it's been for the Falcons a lot, except it was flipped. The offense came alive in the second half while it was asleep in the first. It was a little bit different here. First drive, Desmond Ridder throws a pick, pretty inexcusable, goes down the field, drives, get a touchdown. And it was an impressive drive. It was a very balanced approach. You know, they were doing it on the ground while in the air. And then there was the pair of interceptions. One was in the end zone. Absolutely inexcusable, indefensible, whatever you want to say. Desmond Ridder panicked and just threw it up to his big-bodied receiver, Drake London, which has kind of become a comfort blanket for him. Unfortunately, Drake London wasn't on the same page, didn't see the pass rush getting to Desmond Ridder. It was an easy interception, and it looked really, really, really bad. The other interception, he was targeting Bijan Robinson. I think that's almost everybody's fault. Bijan Robinson didn't flatten his slant enough. Desmond Ridder didn't have the ball in front of him. Arthur Smith, what do we do in double slants on a, gotta have it third? I don't know. But I think the tail of the tape is what you just said. Costly interceptions, red zone miscues, and, operational dysfunction from Arthur Smith. You had miscues where you had to burn a timeout where you shouldn't have. You got a penalty right on the goal line to back you up 5 yards. Those things have to be cleaned up, and they proved costly because you're right. The Falcons, in most facets of the game, dominated the Commanders. And the second half, the Falcons defense gave the Falcons the ball back 4 times. There was 2 3-and-outs. The Commanders' final 4 drives ended in punts. The last 2 ended in 3-and-out. The Falcons' defense did their job, which we've become accustomed to. They looked a little shaky in the first half, but buckled down the hatches, battened down the hatches, and they gave the Falcons offense and this team a chance to win in the second half, and they just didn't come through. I do think that we're sitting here and wondering, what do we have at quarterback? Because we were all talking about Desmond Ridder. Just, keep the train on the tracks. Don't turn the ball over. And that's really been an Achilles heel of this Falcons offense thus far. is costly turnovers and red zone miscues. How that, is addressed going forward, I don't know. Arthur Smith is probably to blame as well as Ritter. But yeah, it's one they should have had.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And I guess that's kind of what you expected when you have Ritter under center and a rookie quarterback, and then you have a head coach that's really hitched his wagon to him. We saw some quotes yesterday. There's not going to be a quarterback change, and that's kind of what we talked after the Texans game. It's like, are we happy that Ritter finally had this game? Because all this, if he went out there and struggled against the Texans and then struggled against the Commanders like he did yesterday, we might actually be talking finally about a quarterback change. But because he had that really good game against the Texans, that probably locked him in for the rest of this season. It doesn't look like anything's changing unless there's going to be an injury. And I think the two biggest things when you're looking at the Falcons and the direction of the franchise is Arthur Smith and Desmond Ritter. Are either of those guys the guys? Because you looked at what happened. Desmond Ritter threw 3 picks. He could have had 4 or 5. There were a couple other ones that also were not good passes. He's just leaving the ball in harm's way far too often. And that's what rookie quarterbacks do, but it's also the sign of a guy who might not be able to make it in this league and cut in this league. You just can't be doing that. And then Arthur Smith on the other end, this might have been the most poorly coached game. It wasn't just, there was the 2 plays that stick out the most are the ball at the 1 yard line, you get a delay of the game. And then at the end of the game, you're trying to go down there and get a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to tie it. And you have to waste your final timeout with the clock stopped after you just spiked the ball. Those are just inexcusable. Those things cannot happen in any scenario. But there were also a lot of motion penalties. There were stuff like that stalled drives, and you end up at 3rd and 24 at your own when you have the ball very close to the red zone and stuff like that. So there were other penalties, and you just got to wonder if either of those guys are the guy. And I know we've kind of given Arthur Smith a lot of leash in all of this because he hasn't had a quarterback. But just the way that the team's playing and some of the mistakes that they're making, that if these things keep continuing, I think his seat has to be hotter than it is. Now, the one thing I'll say is Arthur Blank is very loyal. He has shown, you saw with Dan Quinn, you saw with Mike Smith, it's going to take a lot to get a head coach fired, especially if he likes you. But I don't know. I definitely feel like he's less of the guy. If I were to say 50-50, give a percentage, on what, is Arthur Smith going to be the coach to lead this team with the next franchise quarterback or not? I think it's less than 50%. And I think coming into the season, I would have said over 50%.
I think that it has to be taken into account. And actually, Ritter is not a problem solver on the field yet. Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts even has kind of stepped into this. And then obviously the upper echelon, the veterans, are problem solvers on the field. And Desmond Ritter is not that by any means. So Arthur Smith, and it's Arthur Smith's decision to put him on the field. So, this is kind of his fault. This is the situation that he put himself in, that Desmond Ritter is not that experienced. He doesn't know, he doesn't have all the answers because he doesn't have all the experience. Whereas, you heard it, Matt Ryan in the booth going, yeah, Ritter's got to be able to solve that right there. That's inexcusable from him. And then it falls back on Arthur Smith because it was his decision to put Ritter there. But I do think that, that has to be taken into account, that Arthur Smith almost has to call a perfect game for things to go the Falcons' way. There's not a lot of margin for error with Ritter on the field. But again, you put him out there. It's your decision. So again, that falls on him. I'm kind of in between a rock and a hard place with that one. I don't know if there's a right answer just yet.
Yeah, I agree. Coming up after the break, what is going on in the SEC and who is going to win this conference?